I stood in the marble foyer of my son's Malibu mansion, clutching a Father's Day card I'd bought at a gas station, watching Dashiell raise a crystal tumbler toward the Pacific sunset. $20,000 a month, he announced to his tech investor friends lounging on Italian leather. That's what I send my old man so he can live like the king he deserves to be. The applause that followed felt like thunder in my chest. But when I caught Seraphina's eye, my daughter-in-law, her champagne flute trembled in her manicured hands, and her face went white as the sea foam crashing below. $20,000. I drove a 2003 Honda with duct tape holding the passenger mirror. I lived in a studio apartment in Riverside where the air conditioner had been broken for 3 months. I stocked shelves at a 24-hour pharmacy and drove for a meal delivery service until my shoulders screamed. Yet here I was, transformed into a prop in Dashiell's performance of filial devotion. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was the same son I'd raised alone after his mother left when he was 7, the same boy I'd carried on my back through double shifts at the auto plant, community college on weekends, and dreams I'd folded up like old newspapers to make room for his Harvard tuition. Now, at 62, with arthritis in my knees and reading glasses from the dollar store, I was apparently living like royalty on his generosity. Dad's been so grateful, Dashiell continued, his Stanford MBA voice carrying across the infinity pool where tech bros and venture capitalists nodded approvingly. He always texts me thank you notes. Shows real class, you know? The way my generation was raised to respect family. I wanted to laugh. The last text I'd sent him was 3 months ago, a photo of a sunset I'd taken during my dinner break at the pharmacy. He'd responded with a thumbs-up emoji, but it was Seraphina's reaction that carved a cold line down my spine. She'd set her glass down with shaking hands and excused herself, claiming she needed to check on the catering. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched her pace the infinity deck, phone pressed to her ear, her body language screaming panic in a way her Pilates-toned composure never allowed. The applause died down, and conversations shifted to cryptocurrency and IPOs. Someone handed me a craft beer that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I smiled and nodded as Dashiell's friends congratulated me on having such a generous son, their words falling like stones into the hollow space where my dignity used to live. That's when I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just about pride anymore. Seraphina knew something. Something that made a woman who controlled every micro-expression of her Beverly Hills existence shake like a leaf in an earthquake. $20,000 a month. If that money existed, I was going to find it. The drive back to Riverside took 2 hours through Sunday traffic, giving me plenty of time to let the magnitude of Dashiell's lie settle in my bones. $20,000 a month. That was more than I'd made in my best year at the auto plant, back when overtime was plentiful and my back could handle 16-hour shifts without screaming. I pulled into the cracked asphalt lot of Valley Vista Apartments, where the neon sign flickered "Va Vita" in broken pink letters. Unit 2B had been home for 4 years now, 400 square feet of beige walls and carpet that smelled like the previous tenant's cigarettes. The refrigerator hummed with the determination of a machine held together by hope and electrical tape. Inside, I spread my bills across the fold-out table that served as both dining room and office. Electric bill, overdue by 37 days. Car insurance, canceled last month for non-payment. Prescription co-pays stacked up like accusations. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, the numbers glowing back at me with their familiar cruelty. 347.82 in checking, 0 in savings. If Dashiell was telling his billionaire friends he gave me $240,000 a year, where was it going? I thought about Seraphina's trembling hands, the way she'd fled that conversation like someone running from a crime scene. She managed their household finances, their charitable donations, their investment portfolio. If anyone knew where phantom money was flowing, it would be her. My phone buzzed with a text from Dashiell. "Thanks for coming today, Dad. Hope you enjoyed meeting everyone. The guys were impressed by your humility." Humility. I stared at the word until it lost meaning. What they'd mistaken for humility was actually survival mode. The blank smile of a man who'd learned that challenging powerful people's narratives was a luxury he couldn't afford. But something had changed in that marble foyer. Maybe it was the way Seraphina's composure had cracked, revealing something desperate underneath. Maybe it was hearing applause for a lie that cast my actual struggles as ingratitude. Or maybe, at 62, I'd finally run out of patience for being erased from my own story. I opened my laptop and began typing Elder Financial Abuse California into the search bar. The articles that populated made my coffee grow cold. Dependent support fraud. Tax shelters using elderly relatives. Asset manipulation. Each headline felt like a door opening onto a room I'd never known existed. By midnight, I had filled 3 pages with notes and questions. The investigation had begun. Monday morning at Riverside Community Pharmacy, I stocked vitamin bottles with the methodical precision of a man whose mind was elsewhere. My supervisor, Ezra, noticed my distraction during the lunch break we took in the storage room that doubled as our break area. "You look like someone who found out bad news and good news at the same time," he said, unwrapping a gas station sandwich. I considered telling him about Father's Day, about $20,000 that existed in speeches but not in bank accounts. Instead, I said, "Ever wonder if you're living someone else's version of your life?" Ezra laughed, but his eyes stayed serious. "Every day, my friend. Every damn day." After my shift, I drove to the Riverside Public Library, a low brick building that had become my second home since I'd given up cable to save money. The computers were ancient, but they connected to the same internet that served Malibu mansions. I spent 3 hours reading about financial elder abuse, taking notes on a legal pad I'd found in my glove compartment. The patterns were disturbingly familiar. Adult children claiming to support elderly parents while redirecting funds for personal use. Tax benefits claimed for dependent care never provided. The victims often remained unaware, isolated and ashamed to question family members. But I wasn't unaware anymore. At closing time, I sat in my Honda in the parking lot and made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. I was going to document everything. Every claim Dashiell made about supporting me. Every bill I actually paid. Every communication we had. If money was flowing somewhere under my name, I would trace it like a detective following breadcrumbs. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, knocked on my passenger window as she walked to her car. "Everything all right, Harold?" she asked. She'd helped me navigate the computer systems when I first started coming in. "Just thinking," I said. "Mrs. Chen, if someone was claiming to give you money but you never saw it, what would you call that?" She studied my face in the parking lot lights. "I'd call it fraud," she said simply. "And I'd call it theft. You need help with something?" I shook my head, but she reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "My daughter-in-law is an attorney, specializes in elder law. If you ever need to talk to someone who understands these things." I took the card. Valentina Chen Rodriguez, elder rights advocate. The address was in downtown Riverside, walking distance from the pharmacy. That night, I bought a composition notebook from the dollar store and wrote on the first page, the $20,000 question. What really happened? Underneath, I wrote the date and location of Dashiell's Father's Day announcement, Seraphina's reaction, and every detail I could remember. For the first time in years, I felt like the author of my own story instead of a character in someone else's. The investigation began at 5 a.m. Tuesday morning, before my pharmacy shift. I called Dashiell's office, identifying myself as his father to the receptionist who sounded younger than his luxury car. "Oh, Mr. Whitmore," she cooed. "Dashiell talks about you all the time. How wonderful that he takes such good care of you." I asked to speak with their accounting department about updating my address for the monthly transfers. After being bounced between 3 departments, a harried bookkeeper named Jerome finally came on the line. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't show any regular transfers to a Harold Whitmore in our system. Are you sure you have the right company?" I hung up, my hands trembling as I wrote the conversation in my notebook. No transfers. But Dashiell's public claims suggested otherwise. At the library that afternoon, I searched public records for Dashiell's companies, Cascade Innovations, his primary tech firm, and 2 subsidiaries I'd never heard of, property records, corporate filings, tax documentation that was publicly available. I printed everything, creating a folder that grew thick with documents I didn't fully understand but knew mattered. The breakthrough came Thursday evening. While searching social media for mentions of Dashiell's charitable work, I found photos from a tech industry gala 3 months earlier. The caption under one image made my blood stop. Seraphina Whitmore accepted the Family Values Leadership Award on behalf of Cascade Innovations, recognizing their innovative elder care support program. I screenshotted everything. There was Seraphina in a silver gown, holding a crystal award, smiling beside a banner that read, "Supporting our industry elders, 240, 0 annual family investment program, 240, 0, 20,000 times 12. But I had never heard of this program. I had never received a penny from it. Friday, I called the organization that had given the award. The development director, excited to speak with the father who inspired such generosity, was happy to provide details. Cascade Innovations had established a trust fund for elder family members, she said, tax-deductible, charitable giving that supported dependent seniors while providing corporate social responsibility benefits. Your son spoke so movingly about your situation, she gushed. How you'd worked so hard and deserved dignity in your golden years. It's exactly the kind of family-first values we want to recognize in the business community. I thanked her and hung up, my chest tight with a mixture of rage and clarity. A trust fund in my name, tax benefits for Dashiell's company, public relations value for Seraphina, an award ceremony celebrating generosity that existed only on paper. That weekend, I spread my findings across my fold-out table like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. Corporate documents, social media screenshots, notes from phone calls, bank statements showing my actual financial situation. The picture forming was ugly and precise. I was being used as a tax shelter and public relations prop, while struggling to keep my lights on. The only question left was how deep this went, and who else knew the truth. Monday morning, I walked into the law office of Valentina Chen Rodriguez, with my folder clutched against my chest like armor. The waiting room smelled like coffee and determination, walls lined with certificates and photos of elderly clients at what looked like victory celebrations. Valentina was younger than I'd expected, probably in her 30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a handshake that felt like a promise. She listened to my story without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "Show me what you've documented," she said simply. I spread my evidence across her conference table. Dashiell's public claims, the corporate awards, the phone call notes, my actual financial records. She examined each piece with the focus of a surgeon reading x-rays. "This is good work, Harold," she said finally. "Methodical, dated, comprehensive. What you've found suggests multiple violations. Elder financial abuse, tax fraud, false representation to charitable organizations. What do I do next?" "We document everything and find more witnesses. You mentioned your daughter-in-law's reaction. Her panic suggests she knows something. We need to understand what she knows and how long this has been happening. She recommended I contact other family members, friends who might have heard Dashiell's claims. More importantly, she wanted me to start recording conversations. California is a one-party consent state," she explained. "You can legally record any conversation you're part of. If Dashiell or Seraphina make statements about this supposed support, we want their words preserved." That afternoon, I called my sister Margaret in Phoenix. We'd lost touch over the years, but she'd always been sharp about family dynamics. "Harold, what a surprise," she said. "I was just thinking about you after seeing Dashiell on that tech podcast last month. He mentioned how well he takes care of you. Said it was the least he could do after all your sacrifices." Another public statement. Another lie. I asked what exactly he'd said. "Oh, you know how he talks. Very precise about numbers. 20,000 a month," he said. "Enough to make sure you're comfortable after working so hard to put him through school." I wrote it all down, thanked Margaret, and hung up feeling sick. The lie had spread beyond one Father's Day gathering. It was part of Dashiell's public brand, his identity as a successful son who honored his father. That evening, Jerome from Dashiell's accounting department called me back. "Mr. Whitmore, I've been thinking about our conversation. There might be something you should know, but I need to be careful about my job." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Riverside after his work. Jerome turned out to be a soft-spoken man in his 20s who looked nervous but determined. "Look, I don't know what's happening exactly, but There are payments going out monthly labeled as family support, H. Whitmore. They go to something called Golden Years Trust Management. I thought it was weird that you called asking about transfers, because the money's definitely going somewhere with your name on it. Golden Years Trust Management. I wrote the name carefully in my notebook. Jerome, would you be willing to document what you've seen? If something fraudulent is happening, you're not in trouble for reporting it. He nodded slowly. My grandmother got scammed by a nephew once. She never recovered financially or emotionally. If someone's using your name to steal, yeah, I'll help stop it. By the end of the week, I had 3 allies. Valentina with her legal expertise, Margaret as a witness to Dashiell's public claims, and Jerome as an inside source at the company. The investigation was gaining momentum, and so was my determination to see it through. The first confrontation happened by accident. I was leaving the pharmacy Thursday evening when my phone rang. Dashiell, calling from his car. Dad, hey, quick question. Did you get the thing sorted out with your bank? Seraphina mentioned you might be having some issues with automatic deposits. I stopped walking, my finger finding the record button on my phone app. What automatic deposits? You know, the monthly. Look, if there's a problem with how we're handling your support, just let me know. We want to make sure you're taken care of. Dashiell, I need you to be specific. What monthly support? A pause. Road noise filled the silence. Dad, are you feeling okay? We've talked about this. The trust fund arrangement. Seraphina handles all the paperwork, but it's $20,000 a month to make sure you're comfortable. I've never received $20,000 from you, son. Not monthly? Not ever. Another pause. Longer this time. Dad, that can't be right. Maybe you're thinking of it differently? The money goes into managed accounts for your benefit. Tax advantages, investment growth, that kind of thing. What managed accounts? Where? What bank? Seraphina handles those details. Maybe you should talk to her. But Dad, you sound upset. Is everything all right? Sometimes when people get older, financial arrangements can seem confusing. The patronizing tone hit me like a slap. My mind is fine, Dashiell. My bank account, however, has never seen a penny of this supposed support. The call ended abruptly. I stood in the pharmacy parking lot, staring at my phone, realizing my son had just gaslit me about my own financial situation while being recorded. Saturday afternoon, Seraphina called. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear strain underneath the careful modulation. Harold, Dashiell mentioned you had some confusion about your financial arrangements. I thought we should chat, clear things up. I started recording immediately. I'm not confused, Seraphina. I'm curious. Where exactly does this $20,000 go each month? Well, it's complicated. Estate planning, tax optimization, investment vehicles. We've structured things to maximize your long-term security while minimizing tax liability. Very standard for high net worth family planning. Which bank? Which investment firm? I'd like to see statements. Her laugh was crystalline and cold. Harold, I think you're misunderstanding how sophisticated financial management works. These aren't checking accounts with monthly statements. They're trust structures, managed portfolios, things that require professional oversight. Whose oversight? Mine, primarily, along with our financial advisors. Look, Harold, I know this can seem overwhelming to someone without a background in wealth management, but trust me when I say everything is being handled properly. I want to see the paperwork. Silence stretched between us. When she spoke again, the friendliness had evaporated entirely. Harold, I'm going to be direct, challenging these arrangements publicly, asking invasive questions, making accusations. It reflects poorly on the family. It makes people question your stability, your capacity to understand complex financial matters. That's not a conversation anyone wants to have. The threat was delivered with the same tone she used to discuss dinner reservations. Are you suggesting I'm incompetent, Seraphina? I'm suggesting you're out of your depth and should trust the people who've been successfully managing significant wealth while you were doing other things. After she hung up, I sat in my studio apartment and played the recording back twice. What I heard was a woman backed into a corner, using intimidation to shut down questions she couldn't answer. More importantly, I heard her admit that she was the one managing the supposed $20,000. The next morning, I called Valentina and played both recordings. Her response was immediate. "Harold, we're not dealing with confusion or family dysfunction anymore. We're dealing with fraud, and they know you're onto them." The stakes had just gotten higher, and everyone involved knew it. The decision to go public wasn't planned. It happened during a conversation with Mrs. Chen at the library. She'd noticed me working with legal documents and asked how my situation was progressing. "It's complicated," I said. "My son claims he supports me financially, but I've never seen the money. His wife threatens me when I ask questions. I feel like I'm losing my mind." Mrs. Chen studied me for a long moment. "Harold, my husband worked for the county social services department for 30 years. You know what he always said? Secrets keep abusers safe. Silence protects the wrong people." That night, I created an account on a community forum called Valley Voices, where Riverside residents shared local news and concerns. I wrote carefully, without using names. Question for the community. If a family member publicly claims to financially support you, but you never receive that support, what would you call that? Asking for a friend who's 62, works 2 jobs, and just discovered his successful son has been telling people he gives him $20K monthly while the friend struggles to pay rent. The son's wife manages the money and won't provide documentation. Is this legal? Is this normal? The friend feels crazy and alone. I posted it at 11 p.m. and went to bed expecting maybe a few responses from insomniacs. I woke up to 147 comments. "This is elder financial abuse. Document everything. My cousin went through something similar with his daughter. It's more common than people think. Get a lawyer now. This is fraud. OP, if this is really happening to your friend, there are resources. I'm a social worker, DM me." But the comment that stopped me cold came from someone called Golden Years Advocate. "OP, does your friend's family use Golden Years Trust Management? Because if so, your friend isn't the only victim." I messaged Golden Years Advocate immediately. The response came within an hour. My mother-in-law dealt with Golden Years Trust. They claim to manage elder care funds, but the money disappears. We found out they're owned by a tech entrepreneur's wife in Malibu. Multiple families affected. We should talk. By noon, the post had been shared to 3 other local forums and 2 elder advocacy groups. My phone was buzzing with friend requests and messages from people sharing similar stories. Margaret called from Phoenix. "Harold, someone sent me a link to a forum post that sounds exactly like your situation. Please tell me you're not the friend in this story." "It's me, Margaret." "Jesus, Harold. I've been bragging to my church friends about what a good son Dashiell is. Do you know how this makes me look? How this makes the whole family look? How do you think it makes me look, Margaret? I've been grateful for support I never received." That afternoon, Valentina called with news that changed everything. "Harold, we need to meet. Golden Years Trust Management isn't just managing your supposed funds. It's the center of a larger operation. The district attorney's office has been building a case against them for months." The Valley Voices post had connected my personal nightmare to a broader pattern of fraud. What I'd thought was a family problem was actually part of a criminal enterprise, and Seraphina was apparently running it. The evening news in Riverside picked up the story. Local senior exposes family financial fraud on community forum. They didn't use my name, but they interviewed a social worker who said elder financial abuse by adult children was increasingly common in high-cost California communities. My phone rang constantly. Reporters wanting interviews, advocates offering support, other victims sharing their stories. But the call I was waiting for never came. Neither Dashiell nor Seraphina contacted me directly. Instead, at 9 p.m., a man in an expensive suit knocked on my door. He introduced himself as legal counsel for Cascade Innovations and handed me a cease and desist letter. The letter demanded I stop making false and defamatory statements about the Whitmore family. It threatened legal action for damaging Dashiell's business reputation and suggested my confusion might require competency evaluation. I read it twice, then called Valentina. "Harold," she said after I read her the letter, "this isn't how innocent people respond to questions about financial arrangements. This is how guilty people try to intimidate witnesses." What do we do now? Now we show them that intimidation doesn't work. Tomorrow, we're filing a complaint with the district attorney's office. The secret was out, and there was no going back. The district attorney's office occupied a gray concrete building that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Assistant DA Rosa Martinez met us in a conference room that smelled like coffee and fluorescent lighting. Her desk organized with the precision of someone who built cases for a living. "Mr. Whitmore, I've reviewed the materials your attorney provided," she said, gesturing to a folder thick with my documentation. "What you've uncovered appears to be part of a larger investigation we've been conducting into Golden Years Trust Management." She opened her laptop and showed us a chart that looked like a spider web of financial connections. Golden Years Trust Management sat at the center, with lines connecting it to dozens of families across Southern California. "The pattern is consistent," Rosa explained. "Adult children, typically in high-income professions, claim to support elderly parents through Golden Years Trust. They receive tax benefits, public relations value, and charitable recognition. The parents see nothing." "How many families?" Valentina asked. 47 that we've documented so far. Your forum post connected us to 12 more." Rosa clicked to another screen showing corporate records. Golden Years Trust Management is owned by Seraphina Whitmore through a shell company called Pacific Elder Solutions. Your daughter-in-law, Mr. Whitmore, appears to be the architect of the entire operation. I felt like someone had punched the air from my lungs. "Dashiell? We believe he's a knowing participant, but she's the mastermind. The trust was her idea, pitched to wealthy families as a tax-efficient way to support elderly relatives while building charitable reputations." Rosa pulled out a recording device. "Mr. Whitmore, we'd like you to wear this during any future conversations with your son or daughter-in-law. We need them making statements about the trust, about your financial arrangements, about how the system works. The investigation was no longer mine alone. It belonged to the state of California now, with subpoena power and criminal prosecutors who made Seraphina's intimidation tactics look like playground bullying." 3 days later, the first search warrants were executed. Golden Years Trust Management's Beverly Hills offices were raided at dawn. Seraphina's home office in the Malibu mansion was searched while Dashiell was at a board meeting. Bank records, computer files, client lists, everything seized and cataloged. The local news covered it as a white-collar crime story. Elder abuse scheme targets wealthy families. But the community forums where my story had first spread understood the personal cost. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. These were parents who'd worked their entire lives, only to discover their children were profiting from lies about supporting them. Jerome from Dashiell's accounting department called that evening. "Mr. Whitmore, I wanted you to know federal agents came to the office today. They interviewed everyone who had access to the family support payments. I told them everything I knew." "Are you in trouble?" "No, sir. They said I was helpful." "But Mr. Whitmore, your son, when the agents left, he locked himself in his office for 2 hours. I think he's finally understanding what's happening." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the chart Rosa had shown me. All those families connected by lines of deception, 47 families who thought their successful children cared for them, while the money disappeared into Seraphina's elaborate shell game. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was witness number 1 in a criminal case that would determine whether elder financial abuse was treated as a family matter or a serious crime. The next morning brought a call from a producer at Channel 7 News. "Mr. Whitmore, we'd like to interview you about your role in exposing the Golden Years Trust fraud. Would you be willing to speak publicly?" I thought about all the other victims, all the other parents who'd been reduced to tax deductions in their children's business plans. "Yes," I said. "I'll speak publicly." The silence was ending, and the light was getting brighter. The Channel 7 interview aired on a Tuesday evening, and by Wednesday morning, my story had spread beyond Riverside. The segment was titled, "Father's Fraud. Local Senior Exposes $1 Million Elder Abuse Scheme," and it featured my face alongside surveillance photos of the Golden Years Trust offices being raided. I'd spoken carefully during the interview, sticking to facts rather than emotions, but the impact was immediate and devastating for Dashiell's carefully constructed public image. The confrontation I'd been dreading came Thursday afternoon. Dashiell appeared at my apartment without calling. His usual polished appearance cracked around the edges. His $1,000 suit was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion or fury, I couldn't tell which. "Dad, what have you done?" he said the moment I opened the door. I kept the chain latched and my phone recording. "I told the truth, Dashiell. Something you apparently forgot how to do." "The truth?" "The truth is that you've destroyed my business, my reputation, my marriage. Investors are pulling out. Board members are demanding my resignation. Seraphina's lawyer says she might go to prison because of your goddamn forum post. Where's the $20,000, son?" He pressed his forehead against the door frame. "It was supposed to be there. The trust was supposed to actually support you. Seraphina said she was managing it, investing it, making it grow for your future. But it never reached me. I know that now. Jesus Christ, I know that now." His voice cracked. "The feds showed me the records. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. Property purchases in Europe. She's been stealing from dozens of families, Dad. Using our marriage, my business, my reputation as cover." I unlatched the chain and opened the door fully. My son looked broken, smaller than his 6-foot frame should have allowed. "Did you know?" I asked. "Know what, specifically?" "That I was eating ramen noodles while you told tech conferences how well you took care of me. That I was driving for DoorDash to pay for my blood pressure medication while you accepted awards for your elder care generosity." He sat heavily in my one decent chair, his head in his hands. "I thought the money was reaching you. I thought you were just proud. Too proud to talk about it. When Seraphina said you preferred the funds to be managed professionally, it made sense. You always hated dealing with paperwork. So you never checked? Never asked to see my bank statements or hear me say thank you?" Seraphina handled everything. She said direct communication about money was tacky, that it put you in an awkward position. She said the trust structure protected your dignity. I laughed, and the sound was uglier than I intended. My dignity, Dashiell? I was working night shifts at a pharmacy at age 62. I was buying groceries with coupons while you bragged about giving me $250,000 a year. Where was my dignity in that? He looked up at me with eyes that reminded me of the 7-year-old boy whose mother had walked away. "I fucked up, Dad. I fucked up so badly I don't know how to fix it. The money is gone. The house, the cars, the business assets, it's all going to be frozen while they sort out what she stole and what she spent. I might lose everything." I sat across from him at my fold-out table, the same table where I'd spread evidence of his lies just weeks earlier. "Dashiell, I need you to understand something. This isn't about the money anymore. This is about the 47 other families she defrauded. This is about elderly parents who believed their children cared enough to support them, while their children profited from that lie. I never wanted to hurt you, but you did. Every time you told someone how well you took care of me, you hurt me. Every award, every speech, every business meeting where my poverty became your performance, you hurt me." We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Dashiell asked, "What happens now?" "Now you tell the truth. All of it. To the prosecutors, to the media, to every person who heard you claim to support me. You take responsibility for your part in this, and you help them convict your wife. She's not my wife anymore. I filed for divorce yesterday. That night, after Dashiell left, I called Rosa Martinez and told her about the conversation. I sent her the recording, another piece of evidence in a case that was no longer about one family's dysfunction but about systemic fraud that had victimized dozens of elderly parents. The next morning, Dashiell's lawyer called Rosa's office. He was ready to cooperate fully with the investigation in exchange for reduced charges. The major confrontation was over, and the truth had won. The trial of Seraphina Whitmore began on a Monday morning in October, 6 months after that Father's Day revelation that started everything. The courthouse was packed with victims and their families, reporters, and legal observers who'd been following the case through its complex pre-trial motions. I sat in the third row, wearing a new blue suit I'd purchased with money from the Victim Assistance Fund, no longer needing to borrow clothes or worry about the electric bill. The transformation was visible in more than just my wardrobe. Rosa Martinez opened the case by projecting a chart showing 12.7 million stolen from elderly victims over 3 years. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she said, this case is about a simple crime made complex by sophisticated methods. The defendant used her position as a wealthy businessman's wife to create a fake charity that preyed on family love. Seraphina sat at the defense table in a conservative gray suit, her composure intact but her pallor betraying the stress of facing federal charges. Her attorney argued that she'd been overwhelmed by family expectations and had made accounting errors, not criminal choices. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Bank records showing money flowing into Cayman Islands accounts, property purchases in Monaco and Switzerland, luxury purchases charged to elder care administrative expenses. I testified on the third day. Rosa walked me through the timeline. Father's Day claims about 20,000 monthly payments. My investigation, the forum post that exposed the larger fraud. I spoke clearly about the impact working 2 jobs while being publicly credited with receiving $250,000 annually in family support. Mr. Whitmore, Rosa asked, did you ever receive any portion of the money your son claimed to be paying you? Not 1 cent. The defense attorney tried to suggest I was a confused elderly man who didn't understand complex financial arrangements. But my documentation was too thorough, my testimony too precise. Rosa had prepared me well. The most damaging witness was Dashiell himself. He'd accepted a plea agreement in exchange for full cooperation, and his testimony painted a picture of systematic deception by his ex-wife. She convinced me that managing my father's support through a trust was more tax-efficient and dignified, he testified. She showed me documents, account statements, investment reports. I believed my father was being cared for while I received legitimate tax benefits for supporting him. When did you discover the truth? Rosa asked. When my father confronted me after the FBI raids. When I saw the actual bank records showing no money had ever reached him. When I realized my marriage was built on systematic theft from my own father and dozens of other families. Seraphina's defense collapsed on day 8 when prosecutors introduced recorded calls between her and an accomplice discussing how to manage the old people and keep them grateful but uninformed. The jury heard her laughing about elderly victims who thanked their children for support that existed only on paper. On day 10, after deliberating for 6 hours, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts: elder financial abuse, mail fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, and racketeering. Seraphina showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, but several victims in the gallery began crying with relief. Judge Patricia Hendricks sentenced Seraphina to 18 years in federal prison and ordered restitution of $12.7 million. Ms. Whitmore, the judge said, you perverted the sacred trust between parents and children. You turned family love into a criminal enterprise. The harm you caused goes beyond financial. You robbed elderly victims of their dignity and faith in their own children. Outside the courthouse, Rosa held a press conference announcing the conviction and encouraging other potential victims to come forward. I stood beside her, no longer the confused elderly man Seraphina had tried to silence. This case proves that elder financial abuse is a serious crime with serious consequences, I said to the cameras. No parent should have to choose between questioning their child's love and protecting their financial security. That evening, I sat in my new 2-bedroom apartment, a place I could afford thanks to the restitution fund, and opened the composition notebook where this journey had begun. On the last page I wrote, justice served, truth told, family rebuilt. The main conflict was resolved, but the larger work of healing and prevention was just beginning. A year after the trial, I barely recognized the man I'd been before that Father's Day confrontation. The scared, overworked senior citizen who'd accepted crumbs while his son bragged about providing feasts was gone, replaced by someone I was still learning to be. The restitution money had freed me from the grinding poverty that had defined my 60s. I'd left both the pharmacy and the delivery driving, using my newfound time to work with the Elder Rights Coalition that had formed in response to the Golden Years Trust case. 3 days a week, I helped other victims navigate the legal system and document financial abuse. My apartment walls were now covered with thank you letters from families we'd helped, photos from speaking engagements, and certificates from advocacy organizations. The fold-out table had been replaced by a proper desk, where I wrote a monthly column for the Riverside Gazette called Senior Sentinel, helping elderly residents recognize and report financial exploitation. The transformation went deeper than circumstances. I'd learned to speak in rooms full of strangers, to trust my own perceptions against people who tried to gaslight me, to believe that my voice mattered even when it shook. The invisible man who'd once stood silent while his son lied to a crowd had become someone who couldn't stay quiet when he witnessed injustice. Dashiell and I were rebuilding our relationship, slowly and carefully. He'd served 6 months in minimum security prison as part of his plea agreement, losing his business but gaining something more valuable: the ability to see how his privilege had blinded him to others' pain. We met for coffee every other Sunday at a diner halfway between Riverside and his new apartment in Pasadena. He was working as a project manager for a nonprofit that provided technology support to seniors, a job that paid 1/10 of his previous salary, but seemed to give him peace. "I see you everywhere now," he told me during one of our conversations. "Every time I meet an elderly person struggling with bills, I think about how many parents like you I ignored while I was performing generosity for strangers." The relationship would never be what it was before too much trust had been broken, too many lies had been told. But it was becoming something different, something built on truth instead of performance. The speaking engagements had started locally, but expanded as the Golden Years Trust case became a model for prosecuting elder financial abuse. I'd testified before the California State Senate about needed reforms, spoken at law enforcement conferences about recognizing fraud patterns, and addressed senior groups about protecting themselves from family financial exploitation. Each speech reinforced the same message: trust but verify. Love doesn't require blindness. Your voice matters regardless of your age or economic status. The most meaningful transformation was internal. At 63, I discovered reserves of strength and purpose I hadn't known existed. The man who'd once apologized for questioning $20,000 lies now challenged systems and institutions that failed elderly victims. Mrs. Chen from the library, who'd given me Valentina's business card, attended one of my speeches at the community college. Afterward, she hugged me and said, "Harold, you've become the person your younger self needed to meet." That night, I wrote in my journal a practice I'd developed during therapy to process the trauma of discovering my son's betrayal. I spent 62 years learning to be small, quiet, and grateful for scraps. This year, I'm learning to take up space, speak loudly, and demand what I deserve. The personal transformation was complete, but the mission it had revealed was just beginning. 2 years after exposing the Golden Years Trust fraud, I stood before a packed auditorium at UC Riverside, delivering the keynote address for Elder Awareness Week. The audience included social workers, law enforcement officers, bank managers, and dozens of senior citizens who'd driven from across Southern California to hear the story that had started with a Father's Day lie and ended with systemic change. When my son asked if I'd taken my $20,000 allowance, I began. I was so shocked by the amount that I just nodded. What I learned is that silence in the face of lies only makes the lies stronger. The Golden Years Trust case had led to new legislation requiring stricter oversight of elder care trusts, mandatory reporting by financial institutions, and enhanced penalties for family members who defrauded elderly relatives. 59 families had ultimately been identified as victims, recovering a combined $8.3 million in restitution. More importantly, hundreds of other potential victims had recognized the warning signs and sought help before losing their savings. I'd written a book about the experience, The $20,000 Question, how I exposed my son's elder abuse scheme. The royalties funded scholarships for seniors returning to college and supported free legal clinics for elder abuse victims. The Elder Rights Coalition I'd helped establish now operated in 6 counties, with a hotline staffed by volunteers who'd survived financial abuse themselves. We'd learned that victims needed to hear from other survivors, people who understood the unique shame of being betrayed by your own children. My relationship with Dashiell had stabilized into something honest and careful. He'd remarried a social worker named Elena who specialized in family trauma, and they'd had a daughter they named Hope. At 3 years old, Hope called me Grandpa Harold and had never heard the word allowance in connection with family relationships. Dashiell brought Hope to visit every few weeks, and we'd spend afternoons at the park where I'd once watched children fly kites while wondering where my life had gone wrong. Now Hope chased butterflies while Dashiell and I discussed his work helping other families repair relationships damaged by financial exploitation. "Dad," he told me during one visit, "Elena says the work I do now is the person I should have been all along. People become who they're supposed to be when they're ready." I replied, "Sometimes it just takes a crisis to show them the way." The impact extended beyond our family. The case had inspired documentaries, academic studies, and policy changes that protected vulnerable adults nationwide. Rosa Martinez, who'd prosecuted Seraphina, was now running for state attorney general on a platform of elder protection and white-collar crime enforcement. Most importantly, the story had given voice to thousands of seniors who'd suffered financial abuse in silence. My monthly column generated dozens of letters from readers sharing their own experiences of being used as tax deductions, public relations props, or ATM machines by their adult children. Each letter reminded me why the work mattered. Behind every case of elder financial abuse was a person who'd worked their entire life, raised children, made sacrifices, and deserved dignity in their later years. The golden years trust fraud had stolen more than money. It had stolen the peace of mind that comes from believing your children love you enough to care for you honestly. At the end of my UC Riverside speech, a young woman in the audience raised her hand. "Mr. Whitmore, what would you say to someone who suspects their elderly parent is being financially abused but isn't sure how to help?" I thought of Mrs. Chen handing me Valentina's business card, of Jerome risking his job to provide accounting records, of Margaret corroborating Dashiell's public lies, of all the people who'd helped transform a personal nightmare into systemic change. "Start by listening without judgment," I said. "Document everything. Don't let anyone tell you that family financial arrangements are too complicated for outside scrutiny. And remember, love requires transparency, not blind trust." After the speech, dozens of people approached with their own stories. A bank manager who'd started questioning unusual elder account activity. A social worker who'd helped 3 families prosecute financial abuse cases. A grandmother who'd discovered her daughter was stealing her Social Security checks. Each conversation reinforced the lesson I'd learned at 62. Your voice matters, regardless of your age or circumstances. Truth doesn't require permission to be spoken. Justice doesn't require wealth or power, it requires courage and persistence. That evening, I returned to my apartment and added a final entry to the journal I'd kept throughout this journey. Today marks exactly 800 days since Dashiell asked if I'd taken my allowance. In that time, a lie became a lawsuit, a victim became an advocate, and a family secret became a national conversation about protecting our elders. The work continues. The voices grow stronger. And somewhere tonight, a senior citizen is deciding whether to question their child's financial claims or stay silent to preserve family peace. I hope they choose truth. I hope they choose their own dignity. I hope they remember that love, real love, never requires them to disappear. The legacy wasn't about revenge or even justice ultimately. It was about transformation, personal, familial, and systemic. It was about refusing to be invisible in your own life, regardless of who benefits from your silence. And it was about remembering that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth, even when your voice shakes, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted to keep. The $20,000 question had been answered, but the larger questions about dignity, family, and speaking truth to power would guide the rest of my life.